So I'd like to welcome you all to this webinar with Denise Haddon, and it's on the topic of shining light on trauma. And if you've got any questions, then please put them in the chat so that I can ask Denise at the end. So Denise was born in South Africa and raised in Scotland, returned to Cape Town for 36 years in private professional practice, and currently lives in England. She's a syntonic optometrist, light therapist, visual coach, and author of New Light on Fields and Coaching the Invisible Fields. The key to the remarkable success Denise has had in healing trauma, removing barriers, and empowering clients to release their potential lies in the combining of the information of visual field tests with the insights from iridology. Denise has pioneered a unique diagnostic tool that provides a detailed picture of a client's current emotional state and areas of blockage and the impact these have on the physical health. Armed with this informational insight, Denise can encourage and help her clients in moving forward to a happier, healthier state. I know there's been some truly remarkable returns to wellness through your techniques, Denise, and we're really looking forward to learning about the process. So thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much, Andrew. That's great. Thank you for being able to do this with the International Light Association. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you for attending. This is a really important aspect and subject to think about, I think, right now, considering what we've been through in the last few years. This is also going to be, it's an hour, although a little shorter than that, because we're going to answer some questions, perhaps about 20 minutes or 15 minutes before the end of the hour. So shining light, this is, as I say here, to all of you, to everybody who has experienced trauma, and I think that is every single person on the earth at the moment. The purpose of all of this work for me was actually to heal my own trauma. It's always a journey for ourselves, I think, in all of this kind of work. But also it became a journey to help other people, which was really empowering and very special experience to go through. I started in optometry, but not knowing anything about light as a therapy or as an adjunct to optometry. And when I discovered it, it was through Jacob Lieberman, and he didn't know, and I didn't know that we were both optometrists. And so I was going to stop optometry and start doing light. And only after about 6 months of learning all about light and calling light the colors by the color names instead of the syntonic Greek names that they use, we discovered that we were both optometrists, and Jacob said, no, there's a conference on, so join the conference, where he was speaking as well. So I attended the conference, discovered that one of the most important tool to determine whether you are deficient in light within your system is actually a color visual field. And so I had done visual fields all of my life in optometry, but not actually a color visual field. So I learned that process, learned the syntonic process, and then went back to Cape Town and began using it. And discovered that how much trauma you can see in people's fields, how much our nervous systems are really in a dreadful state as an ongoing traumatic process. And so it became a whole journey in how to discover how to renormalize the fields of people who had gone through not only just physical injuries and accidents and head injuries, but also people who had gone through really quite traumatic crime attacks in every way. So it was it was a really empowering journey, but it was a learning curve for me. And I had studied before light. I had studied Chinese medicine, acupuncture, esoteric medicine. I had been involved with shamanic work. And so I had, when I finally got to light, it was a combination of all of those aspects of knowledge that I had gained that I began to use with this. And so, oh, here we go. So trauma, the primary effect of trauma really is disconnection from ourselves and from others. And it begins in the brain. It begins where fear and physiology meet. And unfortunately, if you do not negate those effects of trauma in your system, then it does become your fate. It means that for the rest of your life, you're trapped in this tiny little visual space and tiny little emotionally trapped space that means you're never going to reach your potential. Or if you do it in a way that you have to dissociate in order to reach your potential. And then what happens is when we dissociate in order to do that, then we come back to a body that is deficient and of course will become sick very quickly unless we reintegrate our whole selves. So animals can shake it off, although I have to say that I think animals are not having such a good time of it either these days, as well as humans. But certainly animals have the ability to shake off that fight, flight, fear, feign reaction, freeze reaction that happens immediately. So they do that. They don't block that process. But as humans, we block that process. We can, of course, consciously initiate that process. And there are various methods of doing that. One of those is trauma release exercises that allows you to release the psoas muscle, which is the muscle that holds all of that tension. And that is really one of the best other methods next to light, is one of the best other methods to actually help to release trauma. And so for humans, what we do that's different from animals is that we anticipate and we imagine future threats. So we trigger a fight-flight reaction just because we're imagining it. It doesn't actually have to be happening, but just because we imagine or we anticipate, then it begins that fight-flight, fear, freeze, feign response. And reduces in that moment, it reduces all of our perceptual senses to a very focused field of vision, but also a very heightened level of certain perceptual senses, but a diminished level of others. And so when you look at someone's color visual field that indicates the state of the autonomic nervous system, then you can see that it will have really diminished right down to sometimes only 2 degrees, and it should be 60 degrees. Where's my tarot? Lost my, there we go. So tree rings also show cataclysmic events that remain in the pattern of their trunks forever throughout their lives. And it's really interesting when you look at that, when you look at fingerprints, when you look at all of the other patterns in our human bodies, we have many particular patterns and maps on our bodies that show where we are holding trauma. And so one of the fields that has, in fact, I presented this in the International Light Association, one of the journals. It's an article on Freud's fields. And this is one, and this shows a human field. a man who was hysterical because of a really serious train accident that he'd had. And this was in 1869. So this is possibly of the first color visual fields that were done. They were certainly being done in the mid to late 1800s. And because medicine had not specialized at that point, all of the doctors were sharing information between them. So Freud was obviously a psychiatrist, and Charcot was a gynecologist. And so the entire range of medical specialities, they were sharing all of this information. So Freud had discovered that when you did a visual field, a color field, and they were using more colors in those days than we typically use today. But when you do a color visual field, you can actually map. He was mapping the women that he saw who he had described and put a label to as being hysterical, because their fields, well, not because their fields, but he noticed that their fields were the same as this particular man. And so when he saw this field and he realized that it was the field of a man, and at that point they assumed that men couldn't be hysterical, only women could be hysterical. But so he then took this chart off to Vienna, to the medical meeting, and presented it to the group of physicians, and said it's not actually true. Men can be hysterical as well, and this is the kind of field that shows a hysterical person. And so he was actually laughed out of the chambers, and literally they threw cream cakes at him for that, because it was a ridiculous thing in the medical system at that time. But this was possible for me to look at that field and to actually describe exactly what was happening with that man as a result of the work that I had discovered with placing an iridology chart on top of a color visual field. So what is a field really? Well, so this is my little drawing of how to, let me just take away this. There's the sun in the sky, and there we are as a human being, and the sun comes through our eyes and onto our skin, into our bodies, and shines through all of the chakras, the energy fields that are also a combination of the nerve plexuses, the nerve bundles, and the endocrine systems in the body, and they join up to join with the energetic field that surrounds us. And so the sun fills our entire system with the frequencies that are required for our system to function well, because the rainbow is actually our medicine chest. And so what emanates from us as a result of this is that funny little colorful blob circle-ish distorted circle that I have drawn there. And so that is our field. And our field depends on, really on it. What it does is it expresses how we do life, how we present ourselves in life as a result of the way that we have experienced life. So if life has been good and safe and comfortable, then our fields are going to be open, expanded with every color and every frequency, and we're going to be able to communicate and have relations with people that are comfortable and easy. But when we have started with a traumatized life, or there's been trauma in our lives, then those fields begin to distort and diminish. And so what that means is when we present ourselves to someone else, we're presenting an energetic field that is very diminished in a variety of ways. And so we'll create some challenges between relationships and between people. And it is this that we have to do to heal the world, is open everyone's fields, because in that way we can understand other people and we can give of our best always. But it's always really important to remember that when our fields are tiny and small and distorted because we've been traumatized, then what we need is love. What we need is an understanding. What we need is someone who's going to be able to, in some way, recognize that your reticence or holding back or your kind of inability to communicate in an easy way is not because you don't want to, it's because of the trauma that's embedded in your system. Oh, sorry, I think I've just pressed the wrong button. Right, there we go. So this is the field that started it all. It was a friend of mine who had lung cancer. She said she wanted to live. She wanted to continue with life, and she had gone through a lot of healing processes. And this was really the first field that I did. I had done my own field, but it was the first proper kind of patient that I did once I had learned how to do this process. And I was really intrigued and concerned by the fact that the blue field there had dipped right down on the 12 o'clock line, right down to below 5 degrees. And my iridology chart was lying on the desk when I looked around and thought, what does this mean? Because no one had taught any method of analyzing a field that explained this in the training that I had completed at the college. And so I turned around and recognized, because of my training in iridology, that line, that 12 o'clock line, is the connection to lifeline. And out of my mouth came, "You don't want to live anymore," which I was horrified about. And then my friend, who was my patient, burst into tears, which made me even more upset. And then she said, "No, you're right. I don't want to live anymore," despite the fact that she had just told me she did want to live. But so this is the secret information that we hold in our fields. For her, she couldn't express to herself. She could only recognize that she didn't want to live when I actually said, "You don't want to live anymore." Until that came out of my mouth, she was unaware of that. Until we did this field and I showed her this field, she wasn't aware, and neither was I. So it began a really profound journey between her and I as to how to open her field. And it was a long journey. She did die eventually, but she died with a full field. And on a shamanic level, on any of the spiritual processes in the world, the process is to actually die with a full field. It's to die conscious. And having a full field is being conscious. And she was really conscious. Her full field came about as a result of going to every person in her life and asking forgiveness and forgiving, and talking about her life to the people that she needed to, and listening to people who were her friends and family. And so she died with a full field. So I was quite devastated, because I thought a full field means we're not going to die, or you're certainly going to be well, that you're going to overcome an illness. It doesn't mean that. But it means that actually, depending on your belief in life, that when you carry on to the next world or the next life, or wherever you feel that you go, that you go with a consciousness and an awareness and a balance and a level of health that is far beyond this life. And so this is the iridology chart that I used placed on top. From then on, I placed it on top of every single field that I did, and it became my map of, and it was a profound journey for myself as well. And from that, what appeared was that I was taking the circles of the iridology chart as such, so the zones that you use to analyze on a proper iridology analysis of irises regards the stomach and intestine as being, and the emotions as being the central field or the central circles, and then the information that you get peripheral to that is the organs, glands, lymphatics, and skin. So it kind of matched, it began to match with other aspects. And it matched with the chakras. So I overlaid the chakras onto those circles. The biomagnetic field and the chakras, as I said, are the energetic glue that attach us to our physical bodies. And they do that through the nerve plexus networks and our endocrine glands. I keep losing my, and so I placed the chakra colors onto a field, the iridology chart onto a field, and I began to be able to read more and more the information from fields that I saw. Then I took a pie slice of that field, and I realized this actually shows a level of the IQ and how we tend to see those people who are highly analytical, logical, and very scientific in their thinking and way of being as the red end of the spectrum, that very sharp, pointed end that is precise and as I say, very logical. And that tends to be where people see IQs. You've got a very high IQ if you're that kind of person. And that the artistic people, the other end of the spectrum, the violet and the magenta, the artistic people that are a little bit out there on a limb, a bit unfocused and not able to do the same kind of logical, analytical processes, that kind of intelligence is not as beneficial or as good. And so I then went to, let's just see if I go back there. What I did then, I think I've missed the slide, but what I did then is I turned that pie slice horizontally and showed people, so all of the patients that I saw and the clients that I've seen since, I turned that horizontally like the little rainbow at the bottom of this screen and said, we are all intelligent. So all of the children that I saw who had learning disabilities and the adults who have learning disabilities, it was, do not see yourself as being not good enough because you're not logical or analytical enough. You're not the teacher's pet. You are a creative person. See yourself as being on a continuum, a horizontal line where we are all intelligent. We all have intelligence in different ways, but we need to just honor everyone's intelligence, and that some of us are never going to be the same as somebody on the opposite end of the spectrum, but we are going to be equal in that, on that level. And so then I added the brainwave frequencies to this process as a result of an optometrist, Joseph Trachman, who did ECG recordings and came up with some research. And so I put his research into this process, and I discovered that autistic children and adults actually have 2 degree to 5 degree fields. So that's much smaller than that red central field. And that the creative ADD, ADHD people tend to be further out, but they can't function in the same way. They don't function in the same way. So we all function on this spectrum of all of the brain frequencies. We just prefer some brain frequencies more than others. So there is my horizontal rainbow that shows that you can be creative and you can be logical, but we're still on the same IQ line. And that gave it was an enormous help, not just to the children actually that I was seeing, but also to the parents, because when a child has got a learning problem, most of the time the parents have a learning problem as well. And so it was wonderful for the parents to look at themselves in a different way, in a way that just honored them. And so this is kind of field that I have seen. This is a field of a young child who was told he was malingering by doctors, other optometrists, unfortunately, who did not know anything about light or fields, and also by ophthalmologists. He was told he was malingering. But in fact, perceptual blindness, which is really what this is, because this is not a measure of a pathological field. It's not that you have lost your vision totally to a tiny little tunnel vision, which is what glaucoma does to you. That is a pathological field loss. This is a perceptual field loss. And what it means is that it is utterly devastating because you cannot integrate, you can't have relationships, you can't remember things, you just can't do anything easily or comfortably when you have a field this size. You become really diminished in every way. And unfortunately, we can't see this in the people that we meet, because these people look normal. They look perfectly okay. This little boy, he was 9, he looked like a perfectly normal young boy. His parents were really furious because they just thought he was just lazy. So he was getting a lot of flack from everybody because he was apparently just not paying attention and not trying. But in fact, there is research that Patricia Lemmer here, an educational counselor, has said misbehavior is an invisible dysfunction related to adapting to the world in an unacceptable way, and it becomes an addiction. So in other words, you shift into an emotional trauma state as a result of your fields being so diminished that you have to choose some other way to adapt in life. And that can be alcohol and drugs, and it can be a variety of other processes. So the process, and I think I'm going to have to speed up on this, the process in terms of traditional societies, ancient tribes, shamanic and healing ancient tribes across the world, they see exactly how I have placed these circles, as that is exactly the way that they see healing in their lives, that the reptilian part of our brain, that is that fight flight state, is also, it's the tribal process. As you move out, the limbic, which is the emotional, and it feeds on sugars, and it's a fight flight state. And that's when we get crazy sugar craving, when our fields are actually too small. That's why. And as your field opens, you then move into the neocortex aspect of the brain, the creativity, and that brain likes ketones, which is obviously a far better food for the brain. And then as your field expands even more, it becomes the prefrontal cortex and the God brain, the enlightened state. So that's what we're really aiming for. And the subtle fields that I spoke about also at one of the conferences is that my vision of how a field functions and how we how we make fields is that the periphery is where we come from, and we move through that magenta, violet, indigo, right the way through to the bullseye in the middle, hit our heads on that bullseye, and that's when life turns around and you think, this is crazy. I'm not living my life the way I want to. And the journey backwards is the journey of healing, which is to turn around from that central red spot and move upwards again, back to focus and awareness and creativity and consciousness. And so the coaching model that I developed was to visualize your highest dreams and desires, and that at the deepest level of your being, really in the core, what is your fear? What stops you from going on that hero's journey? What stops you from expanding those fields of awareness? And of course it is because we have so much shame and guilt and despair about how our lives have been and how we can try to ever change them. And of course we can do this with light. It happens with light. And the journey is a hero's journey. It's a journey of taking that first step, the fool of the tarot cards, stepping off the edge, being a fearless warrior, becoming a sage teacher, and becoming a visionary seer. So remember, it is the rainbow. The rainbow is in our fields, the rainbow is in our bodies, the rainbow is in the world, the rainbow is there for us to use. The magic is there. Once we move from the aggressive, reactive, emotional state, we move into energy, to creation, to the magic in life. And part of this process, and Manisha spoke about the GDV, one of her talks, and I have the GDV as well. I haven't used it very often, but this is one of the maps that I got from a patient of mine, because I was matching maps of the iridology chart on color visual fields with the GDV analysis. And this is an analysis from your fingertips, the energetic field from your fingertips. So it matched up with the work that I was doing. So this is the field of this child. I've only got one eye here, the left eye, only because of time, and also because the right eye was exactly the same. So both his fields were, as you see there, literally 2 to 3 degrees. And his parents eventually brought him, actually his father was not interested at all, because they were convinced that I was a charlatan, having this strange, putting people in a dark room at the back of my practice, looking at light and obviously charging for it. So his mother brought him, and she said, the ophthalmologist has just done his fields. She sent him for a brain scan because she could see that his fields were severely diminished. The brain scan came back normal. And so she said, the ophthalmologist said, this child is just naughty. He's just deliberately not paying attention, and you just need to, kick him into shape. And so eventually the mother brought him to me. She was very suspicious. And when I asked her what kind of trauma her son had been through, she said, none. We are a very normal, very good family. Everybody's fine. And so then I spoke with the young boy, and his mother went out of the room briefly. And I asked him if there was anything that he could think of that had happened in his life that had really frightened him. And eventually, and it took him a while to say this because he was quite emotionally upset about it. He said, my brother nearly died. He nearly drowned in front of me. And this had been a few years prior. And he'd really got a shock then. So he described that to me. And when his mother came back in and I said, And I said, do you want to tell your mother this? And when he did, when he told her that he'd mentioned this event, his mother was very demeaning, said, that's ridiculous. That happened years ago. You can't possibly still be traumatized by that. So anyway, she decided to go forward with the program that I call my trauma program. And from the middle of March, the 11th of March, to the end of May, we went through a process every 2 weeks. So every 2 weeks, I saw him and did another field and showed his mother and showed him what was happening. And every 2 weeks, he came back saying, I can see better now. I can actually do my work now. And the sports coach had said, where have you been? What happened? You were useless, and now you look like you're amazing. You need to be on the first team. And so we went through this process, and that was his final field. The field that you see there that is right out to 20 degrees. And so it was an absolutely profound process. It was really wonderful for this little boy. He went on to really achieve a lot after that, but very sadly, his parents were still thought it was just a fluke, actually, that it hadn't quite, something else had happened, or he just felt better. It was just the way I spoke to him, but it wasn't. It was due to the light. So this is a spectrum, and certainly this is a spectrum in terms of what Syntonics does and how they use light. We don't go into each of the colors, and that's not because you can't. You can, but of course every single color presents an image and a process of some kind of emotional clearing that you go through. The trauma program is 3 colors. It is violet, indigo, and turquoise or blue-green. And that is because what I discovered in this process and in my own process of the trauma, because I have had post-traumatic stress and flashbacks of a very traumatic accident that I had, and surgery that I had where I had a near-death experience. So I've gone through a lot of physical trauma from accidents to my physical system that has made my field very diminished at various times. And so I discovered that actually it's not about red. It's not about infrared, red. It's just got nothing to do with that when you're in trauma, because red says you've got to connect to the earth. Red has an anger and an energy about it, a fire to it that actually just intensifies the trauma that you've gone through and says to you, come and anchor yourself on the earth. Meantime, most of you has dissociated and disappeared to behind the next dimension. So what we need to connect to is something that gives us some sense of trust and love and to a higher power. And so it is violet that does that. What gives us then the awareness and the understanding and the clarity and brings information to us is indigo. And what then reduces and the inflammation on a physical and emotional level to what we've gone through is turquoise or blue-green. We say blue-green in Syntonics because it's a combination of those 2 filters. And of course, that is because the blue is the throat and is a soother of how you speak and a soother of your third eye as well. But the green takes you to your heart, which is where we all need to go and where we need to be able to communicate through our hearts. So this is the kind of field that you will see with a motor vehicle accident. This chap was mid-30s. When the blue field is that small, people do not want to live anymore. On the right eye, you can see the blue field is the smallest. That is the external life. Our right eyes show our external life. For him, he had lost his ability to function in life. His father was having to look after him. He couldn't drive. He really couldn't function. He had to have someone helping him at home most all of the time, actually. In his left eye, this is our internal sense of self, you can see that the blue field is not entirely the smallest field. It is actually the green field that is smaller, or the smallest. And what that tells me is that actually he didn't want to die. He doesn't want to die. He's just so traumatized, he thinks that that's the only thing worth happening is to die, because what else use is there for his life? So remember, this is a spectrum. This is where we live. We cannot lose our way in the spectrum, because that is the energetic field that permeates our body from tip of our head to the tip of our toes. And so within that spectrum, we will find balance. The difficulty in doing any process, any emotional process, is how you actually go through that spectrum. Because when we need to go through the blue and the turquoise area, what we're being encouraged to do is to speak up for ourselves, to speak the truth about how we're feeling, to express to others, to feel that no matter what, we need to be able to express how we're feeling to others in the world. And then what happens is we open the way towards our heart, and that opens the way towards the yellow, which is confidence and clarity and physical strength, and then down to the orange of the joy and the redness, which is the real anchoring into your life and driving lighting the fire in your belly and moving forward. But so the challenge is always, how do we open our throats and speak? And I absolutely know that has been one of my huge issues in my life is how to be able to speak without fear. So it is a challenge, but it's always a very empowering process to take that journey. This is, I've got 15 minutes left. So just very quickly, this is the field of somebody who came, a gentleman who came to see me to have his prescription changed. And he was just intrigued because I said, well, I can improve your prescription. He was short-sighted, myopic. I said, I can improve it if we do your field, and then we can do some light, because you can improve a short-sighted prescription with light. And he looked at me a little askance and said, oh, well, he was interested. So I did his field. He said he was feeling fine. This right eye tells me he's not fine at all, that he wants to leave the earth, that his external world is not safe. It's not secure. Internally, on the left, he is secure, but his external world was not. He didn't tell me about what was happening in his life. He just told me, he just did the field because he was interested. He went away and he did light. And where is the next field? The next field is, there we go. The next field, it was 3 weeks later, this was his field. A dramatic change in both eyes. And when he returned, he came back and he said to me, what did you do to me? And I started laughing and I said, so what happened? Well, he said, the first night I had diarrhea. I never have diarrhea. He said, I nearly didn't get to the toilet in time. I said, and I know that there was nothing else. It must have been the light that did that. And I said, yes, that was a good release. It allowed you to let go of all of the old trauma that you were holding in your system. And he looked at me and he said, right. Well, he said, also, he said, what I didn't tell you was that I'm having a really difficult time in my working situation. It's a great challenge. Also, my son he's been doing drugs, and I'm really challenged by that, very traumatized by that, and I have not been managing at all. He said, in fact, when I saw you last, all I wanted to do was just walk into the sea and keep on walking and not come out again. He said, I no longer want to do that. And so opening someone's fields just in a period of 2 to 3 weeks can change the entire trajectory of their lives. But the most important part of it is showing them the before and the after pictures, because they know that what happened to them is significant and they can actually see it. And then what happens is they want to follow the process after, because they know that it is having a profound impact on their lives. And so he continued until I left South Africa. He continued to come back every year and say, okay, I want to know where I am now. Am I ready to die or not? This is, I think what I'm going to do now is stop and go back to Andrew now, because I'm sure there are some questions, and we've got about 10 minutes left. So the other few fields are of a similar nature. So it's not going to be anything that is really important to miss.
Thanks, Denise. That's fantastic. I really got a lot out of that myself, and I'm sure everyone else did too. I think you really articulate everything very clearly. And I think the insights and the intuitions you've had are amazing. And I think one of the really great things is the way you bring different aspects and bring them all into one whole, coordinated whole. So I think that's really amazing. So now, if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat so then I can ask Denise. But I'm going to kick off with a couple of my own.
Yeah.
So with these eye charts, I mean, anyone can potentially use, I guess, the system to create a chart themselves. Is that right?
Yes, actually. So a color visual field is typically has been in the domain of medicine, optometry, and a medical test. And certainly if you, it's not the same. The fields that I'm doing are perceptual awareness evaluations, not pathological field tests, although you will pick that up in both of them. I mean, obviously you can see, because those are the way we did fields before, computerized methods. So everybody must always have a visual field done by their optometrist or ophthalmologist in relation to getting any kind of pathology assessed. Beyond that, it is possible for any therapist, any person, and I have taught many therapists in actual fact, and in fact also art therapists, how to do a visual field with people that allows you to get a starting point for whatever your therapy may be, and then an end point also for how it has changed. So it's possible, and it's easy to learn how to do that. I teach that process to non-optometrists, to anybody who wants to learn.
Right. And so once you've got your chart, then I guess it's a matter of being able to read the chart, but then also, even if you can read it and you've got those overlays that you've shown us, and you can put together, I guess, some of the pieces of the puzzle. But then you obviously need a certain amount of skill or training to then be able to, I guess, firstly interpret, but then to work with the person and help,
yes,
I guess, them connect with it. So do you want to tell us a bit more about that process?
Yes. So along with teaching the actual fields, I teach you how to analyze the fields as well. And I also have a private Facebook page, Light Field Support. So you can, you know, once you've done a course, then you're invited to join that group, and you can ask whatever questions on there and post fields on there as well. So it's an ongoing free resource for that. And generally I'm available, you know, for the in-between emails as well. People do send me fields when they get a really strange field and don't know how to analyze it. But I teach it on an ongoing basis. And generally they're normally I do it where it's a couple of hours and then a week later, a couple of hours, and then a week later, a couple of hours, so that people have got a chance to practice in between and then come back with questions. Because although it's an easy process, it's a lot to put together initially.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of skill and experience that you bring to it to make it successful as well. So we've got a question from Anna. What kind of therapy do you apply to the patients?
All right. So the method, the trauma program, is using either filter goggles or a light source with filter gels over it for the patient or the person to look at violet for, and the typical program is violet for 10 minutes, indigo for 10 minutes, twice or 3 times in a week, and then turquoise for 20 minutes, 2 or 3 times in a week. So that's the first week. And then the second week, perhaps you repeat the same process. Now, so that is the method that I've used. Now there are various ways of using light on the body and in various different ways. But the very specific process that is necessary to overcome the kind of trauma where you see that tiny, tiny little field it's a repetitive process of continually telling the limbic system it's okay, you can calm down. And with that, because trauma is actually not just about what happened yesterday where you nearly got run over or had an accident, it's about your birth. It may be even an ancestral pattern, but certainly birth trauma, being in an incubator, is a trauma for a child. Any kind of trauma or accidents as a child, and so they just all compound along your timeline of your life. And so with each process of using light, you have to embed those frequencies, violet, indigo, and turquoise. You have to embed them into your nervous system repeatedly over sometimes a month, then a break of a month, then another month, then a break of maybe a couple of months, where somebody is, has actually got really far, like some of those fields went out really far, and then they go away. But people always know when something's changed again. And the kids used to come back and say, or they'd say to their mums, I think I need that light again because I don't feel so good, So it is a process that tends to happen and recur until, depending on how traumatized you have been, and depending on how supportive your process is. So I don't know if that answered the question from Anna.
Oh, well, I think it does, but hopefully it did, Anna. We've got Margaret. Is there an email address to come in contact with you?
Denise Haddon at me.com. Thank you, Anna. So I can, where was I going to put it in the chat?
Put it in the chat, maybe. Yeah.
Haddon at iCloud.com, or My website is denisehadden.com, and there's also another email address on there if you want to have a look at my website.
All right, that's good. Now we've got okay, so from Catherine, we've got great discoveries. Congratulations, Denise. Are there many body memories after your sessions, such as diarrhea? I think that's
so that diarrhea happened twice with two adults who really had a major sudden release. With children, sometimes, and in fact with adults as well, sometimes the very first night of that Violet Indigo program causes a disruption in sleep, or maybe a nightmare, and then the second night generally resolves it and you sleep really well. It doesn't always happen. The people that happens with are the people who are really holding on to their trauma. So they've really dissociated and numbed out to such a degree that they cannot let go. And so it's that fight between your soul saying, come on, it's okay, it's safe to let go, and your recall of the trauma saying, no, it's not safe at all, I don't feel safe. So in those instances, people will have a disturbed night. But once they do let go, then when people start to sleep better, they suddenly discover. The one lady said, I've never got on with my stepson. And she said, after a week of light, she said, I don't know what happened. He came to visit us, and all of a sudden, for the first time ever, we were able to speak with each other comfortably and easily. And her field had just opened. And she was able to see him from a different perspective, because that's what happens. It doesn't matter, even if it is only a tiny bit that it opens, you get a wider perspective, which is more information. And so it means you can make wiser decisions with more information.
Yeah, it's like magic. I think it is like magic.
I think it is magic. I know it's magic.
Marvelous. Yes, yes. All right. So
the color, somebody's got a question there. I see, would colored glasses help too, or does it actually have to be? So tinted lenses and glasses, the whole thing is that on the level of the tinted lenses and glasses that you might wear, they would be, I mean, if it would be a reduced level, if it's not a good idea to have it in your prescription. Well, my feeling is that you should not have a permanent tint on an ongoing basis, because you need to correct the underlying issue, not give yourself what is a very low grade level of reduction in your symptoms, which means you're tied to that. It's like taking a pill for the rest of your life. It's just, the thing is that we can renormalize the system without medication, without pharmaceuticals, without a vaccination, despite what is said, without therapy, psychotherapy. I'm not saying that those things are not necessary. I'm just saying that you can achieve a huge amount of balance in your system, in your nervous system, and strengthen your entire physical system to be able to overcome almost anything when you start to relax that nervous system. And so you're better to just say, okay, I'm going to do this process and I'm going to follow the program. And it's not a long program. I mean, some of these patients and most of the kids that I saw, it was a matter of 2 to 3 months maximum. And that is at home. You get the goggles, they are available, not readily, easily, but certainly I supply them, and optometrists who do light work supply them. And you can use the filter goggles. What I teach on the training programs that I do with non-optometrists as well as optometrists is that I have filter. You can buy the filter gels, so it's a much cheaper way of doing it. And then I can show you which ones to put together to use. So you can make up your own ones. So it's part,
right.
it's so yeah, I hope that answered that. Did I use Chinese medicine? I use it. I understand the field from the perspective of Chinese medicine and the 5-element cycle, and so I can read the field on that basis. That's part of the analysis of it.
All right. How about you've got a couple of books, so do you have any of those handy to show us?
Yeah, New Light on Fields was written 13 years ago. It has a whole lot of fields in it, so it's got color fields, and it also has an iridology chart, transparency that goes with it. And so that was the first one. The second one was about coaching. Also, it's a color book, and it has information on. It has some of the information also on that I have done with coaching. So it's got processes in there as well as cases in there as well. So yeah, so it is. Both of them are available either through Burnell or directly from me. It's probably better to get directly from me, in fact.
Okay, so they can send you an email and then you can work it out with them. All right, that's great. Let's see. And as well, because you do trainings, do you have any trainings coming up that?
So I've just completed two trainings on shining light on trauma, and so there's a possibility that I could put together a course to train non-optometrists before the end of the year, so probably in November, or halfway through to end of November. So if anybody is interested and would like to, then I need to have at least 6 people as a minimum to train at one time. So if anybody is interested, please just send me an email and I can then let you know when the next training would be. And beyond November, then it would probably be February that I will do a training. That's generally when I next do a training.
All righty, thank you. I'll read out a few more comments from Amanda. An absolutely wonderful session, Denise. I always appreciate your insights. From Suzanne, thank you very much, very helpful. And I'll just add a couple of comments myself. I really love the scientific measurement aspect of what you're doing. You know, it's very clear, and because it's very visual, you know, it's very easy to see and compare against what's happening for other people as well, I guess. But, you know, I like the way you correlate against other systems to verify it, like the GDV system. And yeah, so I think it's a wonderful work that you're doing and sharing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to do this. And for everything that Ila does. So let's hope there's a conference soon in person.
Yes, we'd all love that. Some more thank yous as well. So yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in, and I hope you got a lot out of the talk. It was certainly a very informative and interesting talk. So thanks again, Denise.
Great, wonderful. Thank you. Okay.
All right, see you everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.